Maxwell and Epstein had a method. Typically, they would befriend these young girls by asking them questions about their lives, pretending to be taking an interest in them. They would take them to the movies and treat them to shopping trips. Maxwell would encourage these young girls to accept offers from Epstein to pay for their travel and their education, making these young victims feel indebted to Jeffrey Epstein. After developing a rapport with the victims, Maxwell then tried to normalize sexual abuse with a minor victim through a process known as grooming. For example, Maxwell would discuss sexual topics with the victim and undress in front of the victim, or be present for sex acts involving the minor victims and Epstein. Maxwell's presence as an adult woman helped put the victims at ease. As Maxwell and Epstein intended, this grooming process left the minor victims susceptible to sexual abuse.
The villains in these outrageous crimes are the adult perpetrators, not the youth, who are our neighbors, our students, vulnerable foster children, and teens seeking support. Today, we announce the arrest of one of the villains in this investigation. We have been discreetly keeping tabs on Maxwell's whereabouts as we work this investigation, and more recently, we learned she had slithered away to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire, continuing to live a life of privilege while her victims live with the trauma inflicted upon them years ago.
So much to dig in with this brand new indictment and all of the accusations against Jeffrey Epstein. Let's bring in now Court TV special contributor Ashley Banfield. Ashley, good evening.
Hey, Julie, I've been looking through this indictment all day, and also I've been working my sources, and I've spoken to a number of people close to this case. There are some really interesting things that went down this morning in New Hampshire. For instance, this beautiful, secluded mansion, a little over $1 million, with a quarter-mile-long driveway with a gate across it halfway down. Feds appeared this morning and rang the bell at the gate. And that's the mansion that Ghislaine Maxwell purchased in cash about just before Christmas, with some of her apparently $20 million scattered through various bank accounts. All of this coming from a detention memo, because the feds think she has a lot of money, and clearly she wanted to stay real hidden away in this getaway. But she was living in there. She was there this morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, when the feds showed up, and off she went. They took her away. And there was a man who had a thick British accent, who met up with a reporter who had sort of come down the very secluded driveway trying to figure out what was going on behind that gate. And the man with the thick British accent said, the police have been here, and I don't want to have to call them on you, so off you go. So that was all that we could tell you about the actual area of arrest. But Ghislaine Maxwell is like the girlfriend, fixer, confidant, hanger-on, you name it, for decades for Jeffrey Epstein. And she's used to some pretty special finery, like that beautiful home, private jets. She's the daughter of a former billionaire in England, Robert Maxwell, a newspaper tycoon who's now dead. But today, she was not wearing Fendi or any other special brand. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit. And the reason I can tell you that is that I spoke to people who were privy to the Zoom hearing that she had to appear in. And from what I understand, she was by herself on a Zoom camera wearing an orange jumpsuit. It's not as though she looked disheveled, but she sure didn't look put together, which may be understandable given the early morning arrest that she was not expecting. She also wasn't seated beside a lawyer. Everybody in the proceeding was a separate Zoom image. So her lawyer may have been in another location, but wasn't seated necessarily on the same camera shot as she was. It was very perfunctory. It was about a 30-minute hearing this morning where they mostly talked about the technical stuff going on with this kind of a hearing, and she had to agree. She also said that she had consulted with her lawyer about this kind of Zoom-like proceeding, which is going on across the country. But there's going to be another hearing, and we are told that it is likely to be a bond hearing on Monday. We are also well aware that the feds do not want bond because they consider her a flight risk, given the fact that she had 3 passports, $20 million, like I said, scattered through 3 different accounts. And that obviously would be a reason to be a flight risk. She was born in France. She grew up in England. She doesn't really have a lot of connections. She doesn't have any family or children or anything in the U.S. So, it would be very hard to get an extradition from a foreign country. Now, to the other stuff. This was a long time coming for a lot of people. There were a lot of victims and accusers, and I spoke with several accusers today who said, we have waited for someone to go after her and get justice for us because she, they allege, procured, groomed, and even abused many of them, according to these accusers. So today I spoke with one of their lawyers on camera about the keys to the vault that Ghislaine Maxwell holds, because not only is this sort of, justice for the accusers, but there could be, and I'm just saying there could be, a deal that the feds strike with her because she has all the receipts. She has all the black books. She knows everybody. She did everything in lockstep with Jeffrey Epstein as his best friend, girlfriend, confidant. And therefore, it's possible the feds might get even bigger fish. I want you to have a listen to Josh Schiffer as we talk about what this arrest this morning means.
We're incredibly happy. This gives the victims more voice. And one of the problems in this process, due to the complications that Mr. Epstein insisted on inserting into chasing him for justice, was that the victims got erased. We all know what happened in Florida with those victims not being heard due to the interference of the federal government and Mr. Epstein being able to skate on that. Then we've got everything that happened with his death and consolidating the assets in the Virgin Islands to make it more difficult. And then the introduction of the entire Victims' Compensation Fund. Again, while that provides benefits to some victims, it silences others. We're very, very pleased that the federal government has fulfilled its duty to prosecute criminals. These people are criminals. They deserve criminal prosecution, and we're very pleased that the federal government is fulfilling their duty.
So, Josh, I'm very curious about the charges as they were laid out this morning. They allege that other than perjury, that Ghislaine Maxwell really was a facilitator in transporting and facilitating young girls for sex. But the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District suggested she partook in it, and yet there's no sexual assault charge itself. Any idea why?
There could be statute of limitations issues or other charging issues. It could also be a strategic decision. Very often the federal government is going to bring a limited number of charges, but charges that will 100% stick without any questions, because that's how they squeeze the people involved in the investigation. The target is not just this woman. The target is the entire organization that allowed this kind of perpetual, systematic, and habitual abuse to exist out in the open for so long. I will not be surprised at all if there are additional arrests, additional people brought in, both unknown and possibly very famous. This is a black book filled with a lot of big names, and people are running scared.
And that leads me to my next question. Big fish have always been rumored to be a part of this case. I mean, there are conspiracy theories that have clogged the internet. But do you think it's possible that Ghislaine Maxwell will be able to secure a deal for herself if she gives up these alleged big fish?
The Fed always is hungry for cooperation. It's really the only way out of criminal culpability in many of these cases, because the federal government is so efficient at boxing you in. One of the techniques the federal government uses is to go back with prior statements made in an investigation and then comparing them to newly discovered evidence or newly confirmed evidence, and then accusing you basically of lying to them. And as soon as you start lying to the federal government, the noose is done. It's around your neck and you're in for the long ride. It's a mandatory 5 years at times. And so people start to spill immediately. Everybody loves being a big bad TV gangster until you're sitting in the room and some agent, nameless, faceless, you've never heard of, holds your whole life in their hands. And they say, if you don't give us more, you're done.
Do you think that she will be able to unlock the keys that are the mysteries to why Jeffrey Epstein was able to skate for so long?
That's the power that she has right now. She is the safe with all the goodies in it. And it's a delicate balance of carrot and stick. The Fed has some really good carrots and some really big sticks. And if she wants to play ball, I have no doubt that the federal government will be happy to talk with her about all the information she has. But if she clams up, they're going to knock her underground with the names that I hear are being involved.
What do you think is going to happen to Ghislaine Maxwell?
I believe she's going to spend a brief period of time in a very uncomfortable setting. I believe that she will then be released with some pretty strict controls on what she can do, what she can't do. The federal government is going to lean on her big time, and for all we know, they've already been in discussions with her criminal defense counsel about pathways to dispose of this matter and what she may or may not do. There's a lot of information out there we don't know. We don't know what other statements have been made by co-conspirators or other people involved in this that inculpate her into some very significant crimes that carry decades in no probation prison. Federal prison, you don't get the easy release. You go and serve day for day. If they have arrested her, they may already have a deal in place, or they may be using this to exert additional pressure and get more information either from her or from other co-conspirators. Because remember, she wields a lot of power in the rest of this community of people involved with Epstein's crimes. They're scared of what she could say. For all we know, there is a price on her head.
A lot of people watching believe that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself while he was awaiting trial. Is there some concern that Ghislaine Maxwell's safety is in question while she's in custody?
I imagine many parties are going to pay close attention to her health and well-being. That being said, the same number of parties did that with Mr. Epstein. I've given up on trying to talk about conspiracy theories because enough of them have a grain of truth or a boulder of truth in there. I hope and pray she remains healthy, safe, segregated, and cooperative. These victims deserve to know how this organization operated, who was involved, who besides Mr. Epstein and his immediate close compadres benefited from this, because it's a lot of people.
What do you make of the Southern District of New York saying we really still like to speak with Prince Andrew, given the fact that Prince Andrew's camp has said all along he's volunteered? It seems like there's a real disconnect.
There's a huge disconnect, and it's completely manufactured by the parties. The prince has unique immunities. There's not very many other people that can claim what he can claim. It would be reckless of the United States government to make some outrageous threats against him, but at the same time, we want his information. I don't know what kind of brokering's going on back there. I do know that the British people are demanding answers, and the health and well-being of the monarchy in toto is right now under threat more than at any other time since World War II. This could be the kind of scandal that topples a kingdom.
So, Julie, the charges that Ghislaine Maxwell's facing are very serious. One count conspiracy to entice minors to travel for illegal sex acts. One count enticement of a minor to travel for illegal sex acts. One count conspiracy to transport minors for criminal sexual activity. One count transport of minor intending criminal sexual activity, and 2 counts of perjury. All told, it could be about 35 years from what I understand. What's most important, 3 of the victims are unnamed in this indictment, but we do know that one of them is Annie Farmer. Annie Farmer was a very young teenager when her sister Maria introduced her to Jeffrey Epstein. That's Maria on the left, and on the right is Annie. And Maria has been very public, as has Annie, about what they went through and their fight for justice against Jeffrey and against Ghislaine. But it's so sad to think of Annie, I think at 16. There's a picture I've seen of her at prom. She was so young. That's the one right there. Just so young and so sweet. And from what I understand, the pictures are right around the time that she was abused by Jeffrey Epstein and allegedly by Ghislaine Maxwell. So they'll be watching, obviously, very closely as to what would transpire here. And as far as that bail goes, I don't know if she would get bail. I don't know. With $20 million in the bank, 3 passports, and that secret hideaway and sort of being underground for a year, I don't know. I'm not sure I can see it. But I can say this. It's Annie Farmer's 41st birthday today. And so my guess is that she is probably celebrating the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell is facing justice.
Absolutely, Ashley. Happy birthday to Annie, and hopefully she does feel some sense of justice with this big step. I mean, this indictment, this is huge. You know it, and you've done a great job breaking this down for us. Oh, yes.
Annie and everybody. I mean, so many of them have been very public, and some of them have not. And by the way, there was a big sign saying, if you think you've been victimized by this man or this woman, call us, FBI. So they're looking for more information.
Yes, I bet they'll get it. Hopefully this really gets the ball rolling in the right direction. Ashley Banfield, thank you so much for all of that excellent reporting.